Okay, so I've got a big topic, which is the metallogeny of the Abitibi greenstone belt. Okay, so I'll start with an update on the Abitibi synthesis paper, since many of my co-authors are in the audience. So what sections are done? The geology of the time slice, so I've divided the evolution of the Abitibi into different time slices. So the geology would include the deposition of the unit and the deformation of those units. The gold metallogeny section is written. The VMS metallogeny section has been written as well by the VMS research group. So what section remains to be done? The section on the magmatic nickel-copper magmatic deposit by Mike and Michel are working on it. The interpretation and discussion, that's what I'm working on right now, and I'll be showing some of the results of the interpretation. And the section remaining to be done, introduction, a brief regional geology section, and the conclusions. So I'll be focusing on the interpretation, the discussion of the different time slices, and presenting example of gold deposits for most or several of those time slices. I'm also assuming familiarity with the geology and the geography of the Abitibi, because I won't have, I'm assuming everybody knows where Timmins is, where Kirkland Lake, where Rouen is, etc. Okay, so jumping right into the first time slice. So the evolution of the Abitibi, and I will also include the surrounding sub-province, which is the Opatica and Pontiac. So it starts with the deposition of the, at 2790 to 2780 of the Crécy, Devin, and Fecto formation on the Opatica crystalline basement. And so there is data that supports the presence of the Opatica underneath the Abitibi, but also on the Pontiac. So it includes both isotopic study, but also inherited zircon within the older, within younger volcanic rock and intrusion. There's also evidence for the Crécy and Devin formation. It's mostly localized within the northeastern Abitibi, but rocks of that age are seen as well within the Frottet-Evans greenstone belts at 2773, which is the greenstone belt that is overlying the Opatica in the Opatica subprovince. In terms of gold deposit, the only gold deposit known of this ages, and I will be focusing on the gold deposits. I won't have time to go on the VMS deposits. So gold deposit, it's the Troilus deposit, which is porphyry-type deposits in the Opatica. It's not in the Abitibi. And there's a spatial association between gold, hydrothermal breccia, but also 2782 felsic dike, which is at the margin of the Troilus diorites, which is dated at 2791. So it was interpreted, the Troilus deposit by Fraser, I think back in 1993, as being a porphyry-style deposit, but more recently, well, later interpreted by Sally Goodman et al. More as an epigenetic lode gold type deposits. But there is a study, I think, being done right now on the Troilus deposit, so there'll be more to come. So 2750, the next time slice is 2750 million years to 2705. And that's the opening of the North Abitibi oceanic basins. Then you have the deposition of the Paco, Doloro, and Stockton Rockmore. And the Doloro and Stockton Rockmore form most of that northern oceanic basins, and account for 60% of all the volcanic rock exposed in the Abitibi. And that's based on the reconstruction of the volcanic history of the Abitibi by Taos. We also have evidence of Abitibi volcanic rock in the Opatica, and as well as in the Pontiac. And in the Pontiac, this is based on recent work, metallurgical work that's been submitted and impressed by Taylor Charm in the Opatica gneisses, where you have ages, Paco ages, as part of the gneisses. As well in Belle-Terre Anglier, which is on the southwest part of the Pontiac, then you have rocks dated at 2724 to 2715. In terms of structural evolution, there is deformation going on at that time within the northern Abitibi. And this is based on the work done as part of his PhD thesis by Ravelli, which was published, I think, not published, but finished in 2020. And this is a presence of 2717 migmatites and foliations in the roof of batholiths of the Attic complex. And it's interesting to think that deeper in the cross, and this is within the northern Abitibi, that deeper in the cross, you have doming forming at the same time as you have volcanic rock being erupted. 2717 is also the age of the Blondeau Formation, where you have emergent or you have more shallow water volcanism going on. So there might be a link between doming at depth and emergent volcanism within the northern Abitibi. In terms of gold deposit, we have the porphyry-style Côte Gold deposit and the copper-gold Chibougamau porphyry-style deposit. Now we'll look briefly at the Côte Gold deposit. So the Côte Gold deposit consists of gold, low-grade gold associated with hydrothermal breccias, but also with veins, quartz-rich veins. The Côte Gold deposit is hosted by the Chester intrusive complex, which consists mainly of tonalite and diorite. The Chester intrusive complex is dated at 2740, which is the same age as overlying volcanic rock of 2740. So the Chester intrusive complex is a synvolcanic intrusions. Now, to the north is the Rideout Deformation Zone, which is the continuation of the Larder Lake Cadillac Deformation Zone. So in terms of location, we're talking of directly north of Sudbury, because Sudbury is the center of the world. So in terms of gold mineralization, we have gold associated with magmatic hydrothermal breccia, and that's an example where the matrix is either rich in biotite or rich in amphibole and gets itself claritized. And we have gold associated as well with veins. And that's the old Chester mines that was in production in the 80s, I think, or 90s, and those photographs are courtesy of Dan Contact, and it's showing in the working the veins, laminated veins coming together. And it's showing these are taken from hand specimen, and it shows the veins in more detail and its relationship with respect to deformation. So we have the quartz veins being boudinage and chalcopyrite being in place in the boudins between the quartz veins, but you can see also the foliation that wraps around the veins. And this foliation is parallel to the Rideout Deformation Zone. So originally, those veins were interpreted as being orogenic veins. But when you look at some of the sliver of the Osh rock within the veins, they are undeformed. And that's because those veins are not orogenic. The deformation is superposed on those veins. These veins are related to the emplacement of the Chester intrusive complex. This is showing an outcrop, a stripping, where you see several of those veins There's sheeted veins, there's series of veins. What you're seeing in dark is because the alteration halo surrounding the veins is made up of sericite and pyrite. The rusty part is because of the oxidation of pyrite. And you see the foliation that is overprinting the alteration halo, and the vein gets sheared as well. Again, this deformation is superposed on the veins, which have yielded a rhenium osmium age of 2739, 2740, which is the same age as the intrusive complex. Okay, the following time slice is from 705 to 2695, and that's the opening of the South Abitibi Oceanic Basin. And the transition in volcanism, or the shift in volcanism from the northern Abitibi to the southern Abitibi, starts with the deposition of the Tisdale, but peak with the deposition of the Blake River. The last volcanic rock of the Blake River assemblage were in place at shallower ocean depth and includes the Bousquet Formation in Quebec and the Ben Nevis volcanic complex in Ontario at about 2696, and the other one is 2699, 2697. In terms of gold deposit, we have intrusion-related porphyry-style epizonal deposits of intrusive system of the Doyon deposit, which is associated with gold-rich VMS deposits, and as also, and we'll see a bit later, possibly the Windfall and Berry deposit in the northern Abitibi. So the Bousquet, Doyon deposits are within the southern Abitibi, the Windfall, Berry deposit within the northern Abitibi. So looking, these are taken from a compilation paper by Mercier Langevin, 2017, with a map from Garley and Bruno Lafrance in 2014. So the Doyen deposits, it's associated with the Musla intrusion. So it's an intrusion-related episomal type deposit. The mineralization is coeval with slightly later felsic dike, which are dated at 2696.9. No, just keep this age in mind. And the mineralization is associated with pyrite, chalcopyrite dissemination, quartzified veins that are foliation discordant but also transposed. And this is taken from this compilation, which shows the transposition of the veins. This is one vein that has been transposed and is now parallel to foliation with chalcopyrite and pyrite within the veins. Now, moving to the Windfall and Berry deposit, and this is close to Lebel-sur-Covillon, now between Val-d'Or and Chibougamau. So this is the urban Berry greenstone belt. This is a Windfall deposit, the Berry deposit. They're along strike of each other. So both, in case of the Windfall deposit, mineralization is associated with quartz vein stockwork with pyrites that are transposed. There's an association as well with porphyry dike. Some of the porphyry dike are pre-mineralization, other porphyry dikes are cutting across mineralization, and they're dated at 2697.6. They also predate deformation, so deformation is superposed on those dikes. At the Berry deposit, they have exactly the same ages, porphyry dike, within a decimal from the dikes, the porphyry dikes at Windfall. So this age of those dikes is within 1 million years of the Bousquet-Laronde mineralization. Similarly, there's that association with porphyry dike, and also as in the Bousquet-Laronde, those porphyry dike and mineralization is being deformed. So I don't think it's a stretch maybe to suggest that these may be the root zone of a Laronde-Bousquet system. Then 2695, next time slice, it's 2695 to 2690. Now, 2695 is a turning point in the evolution of the Abitibi. Before 2695, it's a synvolcanic period. After that, it's a syntectonic period. So we're entering the syntectonic period of the Abitibi. So, and this is the main deformation event within the northern Abitibi, where we have the formation and deformation shortly after the deposition of collisional basins, and that includes the Opimiska, the Kaopatina, and the Shikubi basins. We have the formation of a gneissic banding between 2702 and 2693 within the Opatica. And within the southern Abitibi, we also have evidence of early deformation that could be the manifestation of that deformation within the northern Abitibi, which with the Manville Thrust faults, which overprint the Lacasse Formation, which has a maximum depositional age of 2691, but must be older than the Larder Lake Cadillac deformation zone. We also have the Marmonite structural corridor, which must be older than 2694 and 2691, which occurs along the Malartic segments in the southern margin of the Abitibi. In terms of gold deposits and the deposits, and this is what we call, this is the first gold deposit event within the Abitibi, within the southern Abitibi. And deposits are associated with tonalite diorites and albitite dikes and expressed as stockwork, veinlets, disseminated pyrites along fragment, replacement zone, cockade breccias. And the example would include Kiana, Marban, and Orion number 8 and Malartic Lake shores. And we'll look at more specifically at Malartic Lake shore. And those diagrams are taken, this map is taken by a paper by Gay that was supervised by Pierre Pilote and Réal Legno, and this map is taken from an MSc thesis by Liam Ma, which was at INRS, which was supervised by Patrick Mercier-Langevin. So it shows the deposit. This is the Marmonite would be, it's difficult to see here. The Marmonite would be over there to this. This is this structural corridor that extends from Rivière-Eva along the Malartic segments up to Val-d'Or and includes also part of the Goldex deposit in Val-d'Or. So mineralization, this is what we call like informally early gold, the early gold event within the southern Abitibi. So, and this picture is taken from Lakeshore Malartic, and this is from this map, and it shows the rock here are mafic volcanic rock, pillowed rock, very strongly deformed, very strongly foliated. There's dikes within that zone, dated at 2694, and the dikes are overprinting the quartz veins. So this is one of those dikes which are cutting across the quartz vein, suggesting that this is a good evidence of that early gold event older than 2694 within the southern Abitibi. Okay, so 2690 to 2682. So we have migration, the southward migration of the orogenic front from the northern Abitibi to the southern Abitibi, with the formation and deformation, formation or deposition of the turbidite of the deep water turbidite of the porcupine, and their deformation during the same time frame. Porcupine being dated at 2687, that would be the age of the Chris Vulcan Classic rock at the base of the porcupine. Okay, 2682 to 2669. The Abitibi now is under extension. And we have the position of the Pontiac and Temiskaming Basin. There's very little age difference between the Pontiac and the Temiskaming. The Pontiac is well dated at 2682, and the Temiskaming, its maximum depositional ages is around 2679 and extends down to 2669. So we have opening of an extensional basin. Why is it extensional? Well, because as a metallurg paper that was published a couple of years ago by Adrian Ram shows that the komatsiite and floats and toditic basalt within the Pontiac are syndepositional, which require extension, but also we have a high temperature, low pressure, early metamorphic event within the Pontiac, which is consistent with extension and placement of intrusions within the Pontiac. The Temiskaming sedimentation and volcanism is preceded, and the Temiskaming consists of fluvial, alluvial sediment, but also subalkalic to alkalic volcanic rocks. And it's preceded by the emplacement of 2685 to 2680 dioritic to monzonitic to cyanitic stock, the so-called, and with those intrusion can be associated what is called the intrusion-related gold deposit. They're syntectonic, and also been called a cyanite-associated gold deposits. Some of the best example is the Upper Beaver deposit, and we also have later type of deposits or within the Temiskaming. It could be Wasamac, BT, and McIntyre, but for those three last deposits, there's no direct association with a stock. Though the McIntyre, the mineralization is associated with albitite dikes, about 2672. In the case of Wasamac, then there is all the evidence of being intrusion related in terms of the potassic alteration, the Kieferspar alteration, the presence of magnetite, hematite that suggests oxidized fluids, but there is no stock directly associated with Wasamac. Now, if we look at an example of an intrusion, the Upper Beaver deposit, then the Upper Beaver deposit is hosted by dioritic stock. It's cut by monzodioritic porphyry dike, which is itself cut by later dike, which is dated at 2678. The mineralization is dated at 2680 and 2685, and that's rhenium osmium ages. And there's two styles of mineralization at the Upper Beaver. There is an early skarnoid type mineralization, and this is an example of it, where the mineralization consists, is semi-concordant with respect to stratigraphy in the volcanic rock, which is a Blake River volcanics, and is associated with epidote. It gives it a very green look to the rock, but also there's garnet in it, so you have that green spotted right. There's actinolite, cerussite as well, magnetite, hematite. And most of the ore is associated with late discordant veins that are parallel to those veins and cut across the skarnoid alteration. And it's associated with quartz carbonate, pyrite, chalcopyrite, and magnetite. Okay, the main 2669 and 2643 is the main orogenic event within the Abitibi. So it's what we call the D3 event within the Abitibi, and it's mainly affects mainly the southern Abitibi and the Pontiac, and the Temiskaming Basin. And so here I've changed the and this can be a discussion, has changed the overall thrusting from south-directed during the Porcupine event to north-directed during the D3 events, based on 3 or 4 lines of evidence. First is that in Timmins, there is very good geometrical evidence based on the work that was done on Wouter Billikers in papers published in 2012 and 2015 for the preservation of the Temiskaming in the footwall of reverse faults, indicating south-directed thrusting. In Kirkland Lake, there is evidence as long as like 80 years ago by John Thompson for reverse north-directed faulting in the Kirkland Lake camp. Now, more recently, in Dobie and Cheminis as well, there's an evidence for north-directed thrusting, and moving to Val-d'Or in Quebec, most of the faults that host the gold deposits are reverse south-side-up faults. Now, the gold deposit we have, this is the golden age of gold deposit within the Abitibi. So this is a formation of the orogenic gold deposit that accounts for most of the gold within the Abitibi. But we have 2 timing in terms of gold deposits. We have early orogenic gold deposits, and the synmetamorphic synfoliation, and would be forming at 2665 to 2657. Example would be the Canadian Malartic deposit, Kerr-Addison deposit with the Cheminis, which we'll be looking at later on. And next slide. And we have late post-metamorphic orogenic gold deposit, Sigma-Lamaque, the Triangle, and Ormac. When I say post-metamorphic, it overprints those deposits, overprints the alteration minerals, overprints the metamorphic minerals, but they're forming during the same D3 deformation event, but they're simply late during that deformation event. Okay, so this is from the Cheminis deposits, which is a satellite deposit of the giant Kerr-Addison deposit. So it's representative of the early style of orogenic gold mineralization along the Lord Lake gold deformation zone. So 2 types of ore that can be seen within at the Kerr-Addisons are the flow ore, where we have gold associated with disseminated pyrite, albite, ceresite in iron-rich dolomite volcanic rock, and we have the carb ore, which is really it's quartz veins that are stockwork of quartz veins that are cutting across fixitic ultramafic rock. The late orogenic gold mineralization has been dated at 2643 by, now I'm blanking out, but from PhD student from the Laval group, and it's represented by several deposits, Sigma-Lamaque, Goldex, Triangle, and Ormac. And this is taken from the Ormac deposit that shows a typical type of mineralization along in the Val-d'Or mining district, where fall fill veins that are occupying reverse faults are associated with shallowly dipping extensional veins. And this is a cross-section that shows the other deposits. It's projected on this section and shows the association of those deposits with the C porphyry, which is a synvolcanic porphyry dated at about 2704, and some late stock or pipes that are dated at 26AD5. And that's a photograph showing one of the extensional veins with fibers of quartz and tourmaline. So summary and conclusion. So I'll just go briefly. Those are some of the major events in terms of the geological evolution of the Abitibi. So first we have at 2790 to 2780, the deposition of the Crécy, Devin, Fectovolcanics on the Opatica. This is followed at 1734-1720 with the opening of the northern Abitibi Oceanic Basin and the position mainly of the Doloro and Stockman Rockmore. There's a transition of volcanism moving towards the south, which starts in the Tisdale with the deposition and eventually end up with the Blake River with deposition of the formation of the southern Abitibi Oceanic Basin. 2695, that's the turning point in the evolution of the Abitibi, where we change from the synvolcanic period to the syntectonic period. And we have the depositions and the formation of collisional basins within the northern Abitibi. And that's the main orogenic event in the northern Abitibi. Southern Abitibi, which, then we move to the southern Abitibi, 2690 to 2682. That's what has been called in David Moll's paper, the porcupine orogeny. That's a deposition of the porcupine turbidites and followed by their deformation. Now, then at 2682 to 2669, the deposition of the Pontiac and Témiscamingue in extensional basin. So now the cross is under extension. And 2665 and 2643 is the main orogenic event within the southern Abitibi. And I didn't mention it, but there is some evidence that it could also have affected the northern Abitibi because of the Douai syenite along the Casa Berardi deformation zone, which is sheared and malonitized, though the ages of the Douai syenite may be needs to be refined. And younger than 2643, which wasn't covered in this talk, is where we have thermal cooling, thermal relaxation, and the emplacement of S-type granites and intrusions. So in terms of the gold metallogeny of the Abitibi, so 2695, it's the turning point in the Abitibi. Before 2695, all the gold deposits are porphyry-style deposit. They're synvolcanic porphyry-style deposit. And what's interesting as well is that when you have one deposit, you have a cluster of deposits and you have different type of deposits. So for example, the Doyon deposit within the Bousquet-Larange is associated with VMS-rich deposit. The Chibougamau type deposit, which is an intrusion-related porphyry-style deposit, is associated with epithermal deposit, the Bosnan deposit, which was studied by Olivier Côté-Manta as part of his PhD. Then afterwards, 2695 is the syntectonic deposit, starting with the emplacement of intrusion cyanide associated type deposit, and then the orogenic gold deposit, where there is early orogenic deposit and late orogenic deposit. And I forgot to mention the early gold event, which is in between 2695 and 2690. Okay, thank you.